I don't know why they've kept you in 18 years. I don't know what the reason is.
There is no reason, mate.
Graham's talking to his son Carl, who's in prison. He was sentenced to 18 months when he was 27 for an assault following a road rage incident. Now 43, Carl's never been released.
I'm getting emotional just thinking about it, mate, to be honest.
Well, we're up Friday, ain't we? So just think of that.
Wait to see you.
IPP, or imprisonment for public protection sentences, were introduced by Labour in 2005. Meant for serious offenders, some prisoners ended up being locked up indefinitely for minor crimes. With no release date, many developed severe psychological issues. For Carl, that led to him cutting off part of his ear.
This probably started when we lost my mum a few years ago. He wasn't even allowed to the funeral. He was left in the cell just to bleed out. There's been no support, no treatment. It's been absolutely shocking.
Oh, I can't even talk when I think about it.
No, I know I said I wasn't going to be like this anymore, but I just can't help it, mate. And then when you're asking how I'm truly feeling, it's just, this is how I'm feeling, mate, all the time. I can't help it, I feel embarrassed.
Just listen, no,
No, you've got nothing to be embarrassed about, Carl.
Be strong, bruv, be strong.
Carl was refused release in 2018. He's had no parole hearing since, and he's currently being held in a maximum security prison.
Listen, see you Friday, right?
All right, love
Love you.
you,
Chin up.
Dan, I'll see you Friday, mate.
See you Friday, right? Ta-ra, love you. Ta-ra.
Ta-ra.
There's thousands of IPP prisoners still in prison when they shouldn't be. I just think it's just torture, and it's something needs to be done. So we're supposed to be a fair democracy.
See, this country, to be honest, is full of shit. It's full of shit, right? They blame every other country for their human rights, China, whoever it is. And we're up there with them. We're up there with them.
Even the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture is now investigating, after campaigners such as Shirley de Bono brought it to her attention.
This is one of the most egregious miscarriages of justice that I've seen in the UK justice system, which is renowned for being based on the rule of law.
When you first heard about the IPP sentence, what was your feelings?
Disbelief. As a general rule, under human rights law, but also general criminal procedure, people are not sentenced to preventive detention. This is arbitrary detention as a general rule under international laws.
IPP sentences were abolished in 2012, but there are nearly 3,000 prisoners still being held. Dr. Edwards has written to the government to demand action.
I think they infringe on fundamental human rights. And, you know, part of the next stages really needs to also be a process of reparations, rehabilitation and compensation, both to the individuals and to the families. They have suffered miscarriages of justice.
The UK government is yet to respond. A year ago, the Justice Select Committee said all IPP prisoners should be resentenced, but the government rejected their advice. We've discovered in the following weeks 6 IPP prisoners took their own lives. And the government's own figures show 81 IPP prisoners have committed suicide since the sentence was introduced.
You can't lock people up in prison without an end date. The hope's gone. A person with no hope don't have no existence in life. You're killing people. You're literally killing people.
Imagine someone put a bag over your head and you're in complete darkness. You don't know when they're going to take it off. You're going to go mad at some point.
One guy, an IPP prisoner, yeah, he was stressed out, yeah. The officers was ignoring him. He was on a suicide watch, I understand, yeah. They was just leaving him in the cell all the time, yeah. And his friend just heard like someone falling over on the cupboards. I woke up and he said, someone's dead. I said, you're lying.
If IPP prisoners get out, their ordeal isn't over.
Hi, Martin. Come in. Good. I'm good, dear.
That's because they are released on a 99-year licence, meaning they can be recalled back to prison at any point, even for minor infringements like being late to a probation meeting. Nicole used to be addicted to drugs and took part in a robbery. She was sentenced to 18 months.
I went to prison 2007. I got out 2011. I was out for 7.5 years. I'd built my whole life in Southampton, so to be instantly recalled like that with no kind of help or support, it was hard. It was hard.
Because of her lifelong licence, she has been recalled 3 times, twice for relapsing and once for going on holiday without telling her probation officer. In total, she spent nearly a decade behind bars.
So how frustrating is it to have been in the community for so many years and then to be continuously recalled for no crime committed?
In the beginning, it was very hard. You know, I wanted to take my life. You know, there was no end goal. Sorry. It's just really hard.
According to the Ministry of Justice, between 2020 and 2022, 19 IPP prisoners out on licence took their own lives. They told us,
"We are helping those still in custody to progress towards release, including improving access to rehabilitation programmes and mental health support. While public protection will always be our priority, we are carefully considering what additional measures might be put in place."
until the government bows to increasing pressure to right this injustice, many thousands of men and women remain suffering in purgatory.
Well, let's talk now to Mark Day, the Deputy Director of the Prison Reform Trust and its representative on the Ministry of Justice's IPP External Stakeholder Challenge Group. It's quite hard to understand why this situation is going on. The government accepted more than 10 years ago that these sentences were wrong, yet there are thousands of prisoners still on them and people dying. So what isn't happening that should happen?
Well, the problem that we currently face is the IPP was abolished in 2012, but it had been in existence since 2005. So obviously during that time, thousands of people were given an IPP, indeed many more than had originally been planned for the sentence. And despite abolition in 2012, those people remain on the sentence subject to the IPP, either in prison, 1,300 people having never been released from prison, and then a further 1,600 people who have since been recalled back to custody.
But why don't they go through the parole system?
Well, they are going through the parole system, but what the Justice Committee found is that the IPP prisoners were facing very significant barriers to their progression, so being able to demonstrate reduced risk to the parole board, and that the IPP itself was having severe psychological impacts on people, which in turn was creating a vicious cycle, making it harder for these people to progress properly through the sentence.
I mean, there will be, plenty of people out there. We've had the Conservative Party conference today with sort of tough messaging on sentencing and life sentencing, who say, well, these were people who were judged by the legal system to be a threat to society. That's why they were locked up indeterminately. Why should I worry about them?
Well, I think it's important to recognise that Parliament itself has now abolished this sentence, so does not consider it to be a sentence that should be on the statute book. And many people who received an IPP during the time it was in existence, if they had received the equivalent determinate sentence for the crime that they had committed, they would have been out of prison years ago. But for them now, they still remain in prison many, many years over the expiry of their original tariff.
So what could the Justice Secretary do about this problem?
Well, the Justice Secretary himself has acknowledged that this sentence is a stain on our justice system, and he has promised to revisit the recommendations of the Justice Committee and its report on the IPP. He's already said that he wants to look at reviewing the what is known as the qualifying period for a licence review, bringing forward the date when an IPP can have their licence reviewed in the community and have it potentially terminated. We would like him to go much further than that. Bob Neal, the chair of the Justice Committee, has put down an amendment to the Victims and Prisoners Bill, bringing forward that principal recommendation from the IPP report for the resentencing of IPP prisoners. We think with the UN's intervention, it is now the right time for the government to give very serious consideration to that recommendation.
Mark Day, thank you very much.